Basil ice cream. Oh, I'm sorry. A couple years ago. It was blackberry. Yep. Blackberry pie. Basil ice cream.
Yeah, just a couple quick announcements for the board to think over. You can probably do this by email, but Ann Watson called me today. Apparently, on the 18th, the EIC is presenting some results from the net zero to the city council. That's also, I think, our board meeting. So if board members want to attend that, we might want to think about either doing a joint meeting or rescheduling ours for the next week. We can work that up by email with as well. I talked to Carol from Restorative Justice, and we were playing phone tag, but she has some proposals and questions. Just need to circle back on that. And then I touched bases briefly with Nathan about coming back, and we might want to do that for that later on. But again, I'll follow up on that. Talk more. So public comment. So we have a fair amount of folks. So if anybody wants to give public comment, we.
Do we want to quickly introduce ourselves?
Yeah, no, we definitely could. Let's start with Jared.
Jerry Buck, local school board member. I know some of you. Not much else to say.
I'm Jill Remick. I'm a Roxbury School Board
Can
member.
you speak up, man?
Sure thing. I live in Montpelier and I have a daughter at the middle school.
I'm Kristen Getler. I am a school board member for MRPS and Roxbury resident.
Yeah, and I'm Jim Murphy. I'm also a Montpelier resident and board member, and I've a stepson and a son about to go to MHS and a daughter in.
Superintendent.
I'm Emma Bay Hansen, and I was actually born in East Roxbury, so I have my roots here, and then raised in Montpelier, and I'm serving on the board, and I have 2 kids in the district.
I'm Amanda Garces, and I am a Montpelier resident, and I have 2 kids in the district. And me.
My turn.
Yeah, and we can hear you
Can
well.
you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Mia Moore. I am a Montpelier resident and a member of the school board. I have 3 kiddos in the district as well.
So hearing no public comment, just like we don't have anyone. Okay, great. Let's move to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve, but I'd like to pull the superintendent report, the facilities committee notes, and the August 4th draft agenda, just with some, with what I think will be very quick questions.
Okay, so the superintendent's report, and what else do you want to pull? The
Facilities committee notes
okay.
and the August 4th draft agenda.
All right. Great, so do I have a second to approve the consent agenda with those 3 things pulled?
I second.
Great. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Great, consent agenda passes. And go ahead, Neil, with those 3 items.
Great, thanks. So first on the superintendent report, I wanted to say thanks, Libby, for sharing that process, like laying out the process for us that you're holding as you work through the proposal for the ESSER 3 funds. And then on you mentioned that there will be a board vote. Is that an up or down vote, or will there be a way for the board to provide more nuanced feedback on the plan or proposed plan?
Yeah, so we have scheduled in the, if you click on the yearly plan documents, you can see in August, we'll have a board presentation around the ESSER 3, including what kind of feedback we got from the survey. And so you'll have a chance to ask questions and have discussion then, and then it will be up or down.
Will we also vote? That actually is the August 4th question I have. Will we also vote on the 4th, or do we vote on later than that?
We'll vote on, I think we have it planned that we'll vote on the 4th.
Okay. For the facilities committee minutes, one, thank you. I know Andrew LaRosa isn't here, but I just wanted to say really great notes. That was super duper helpful. I understand how the committee, one of the things in the notes that you named is that it's not a decision-making committee, which makes a lot of sense to me. I'm curious if you're thinking about it as a recommendation to, like, would there be recommendations to the board where the board makes decisions, or is it really, would those recommendations not come out of the committee? So I guess that's for any member of the committee who's in the meeting tonight.
To introduce myself for the record anymore, like the
No.
legislature. Okay.
We will have nameplates. We just
Yeah, we
Okay.
usually have nameplates. We do not currently.
Yeah, that was one of the things we talked about. Well, basically, we want to sort of beef up some of the knowledge on the board about the facilities and really get to know them better. One of the pieces that came out of it is we want to make sure that Andrew hosts tours of each of the buildings and that we would sort of help facilitate that. And then things like the net zero piece that one of us would probably listen in on that conversation as well, so that we can then report back to the board on that piece. So I think it's more of a building a knowledge base. And then if and when there are things that need a deeper dive, this would be the place to put it. If there's a student proposal about a facility item, this committee can hear it first and bring it back to the board. So I think it's like a channel of, building up that knowledge base and giving it to the board. I don't think it would get that much farther into major policy decisions. That would be for the larger board to discuss. I think I have that right.
Great. Thanks, Jill. And the last thing on the August 4th draft agenda actually was really just a thank you, and really appreciate seeing the draft schedule of meeting topics. It's very helpful to be able to see like the full context, see each meeting in the full context of the year. So that's it for me. Should I make a motion to approve those 3 items then?
I do have a question regarding the ESER 2 fund.
Yep.
ESER 3. So when, how much are we taking into the feedback? The feedback from the community is like a mayor or yay on the plan that's already been draft. That's what it is. Like there's no, is there a way for community to say there's like some other needs that are needed in that?
On the
that
survey,
type
the
of,
last survey question, I just read it. It says something like, what other things would you like to consider as we go forward with different funding buckets?
Is this a survey that's already gone out, or is this something that's?
It came out today.
Go
Me
ahead.
again?
Do you want to move that motion forward?
Sure. So I'll move to approve the superintendent report, the facilities committee minutes, and the August 4th draft agenda.
Great, thank you. And do you have a second?
A second.
Thanks. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thanks. And if anyone have any objections to just adding a quick public comment after the visioning presentation, because my guess is that's probably why the number of people are here. So
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
all right,
that's a great idea.
perfect. So we'll give kind of 5 to 10 minutes at the end of that. Great committee updates. So I don't know, Jill, do you want to do facilities committee?
Sure.
Anyone else?
I can just expand a little bit. Andrew LaRosa is the facilities director for our district, and he is going to be, and actually has already presented to the board and the public in the past, and he's going to make it a regular piece, sort of a punch list of all the different items that are needing to be addressed in the various facilities, and also the pieces that have been, amended and fixed and addressed. There's a lot of age in a lot of our buildings that need some attention. And so it's helpful context for us as a community and the board to sort of know, as we start to sort of move towards other directions of what we might want to focus on or where we might want to spend money, that we have that context of things that might not seem particularly exciting, but they need attention, like heating and windows and painting and, mitigating health issues in buildings, that those things are really important. So he's actually going to be making sure that each fall as a community, we have a really holistic picture of each and every building and grounds need, so that when we do have to make tough choices, we've got some priorities, we're making an informed decision rather than just sort of taking what comes across on the fly. So I'm really excited. I think we're going to try to have the tours adjacent to a board meeting. So for example, next time we're in this building, then we would have a tour either immediately before or immediately after that board members and the public could take to just really get to know the buildings a lot better. So we have some context when we're talking about that stuff. So yeah, and as I mentioned before, just having sort of a conduit for the board when students might have a particular thing like the track that came up recently, or if there's something from that net zero result that the board needs to consider, that we'll sort of be following that conversation.
Questions for Jill? How many people have had a tour input which is all for.
Well,
Kind of,
Andrew would have
Andrew.
not an official tour.
been, not an Andrew LaRosa tour.
Not an
That's a
Andrew
very
LaRosa
different tour than any
I
other.
don't know if I've had an Andrew.
I think you went to UES with Andrew.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be great. Sounds awesome.
Okay, I think just one thing to keep in mind with funding, where there's definitely restrictions on ESSER funding. I think it does give us some room to think about. Investments for that to free up, capital money. and other things. Superintendent evaluation, I'm happy to do it, Jerry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So Libby and I have gone over her evaluation and had some back and forth. I think the biggest next step is Libby wants some clarification on just a couple things to make sure that there are clear objectives and goals and benchmarks. And we are trying to close the circle on that. In summer vacations, it never happens. Anything to add?
So what are the next steps? Do we need to meet with Libby as a committee to go through that, or do we go through you and use the document?
I think we do it either way. I think probably the best way is to get some of it in writing, and then we can probably pass it on, and then maybe you and I can talk about whether we should go before the full committee and talk it out, or whether we can just like meet separate as a committee and go back to her.
I think maybe we'll have a committee meeting and documents, and then.
Okay, perfect. I mean, the committee will probably need to go over some of the feedback.
Yeah.
To, Any questions?
Would it be helpful to have any other input from other board members, or in a committee conversation about what the benchmarks would look like?
I think it definitely would be helpful. Let us see what we put together and kind of how, like, when the best part to input would be. But yeah. Any other questions on it?
I think I just didn't catch the, Jerry, did you say you'll take point on setting up a eval committee meeting, or would you like me to do that?
I can do it if you want. Up to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Mia, can you hear okay?
Like sometimes like the ends of words or the ends of sentences are getting a little bit swallowed, I think, but mostly yes.
And
Thanks for checking.
Where are you getting your audio from? Your computer? Or?
Yeah, yes, it's coming from my computer. Like it's in my ears, but yeah.
Your voices are going to the owl in the middle.
Okay.
That's how she's hearing you.
Okay, good to know.
All right, so visioning, and then you've got a presentation.
You want to set it up? You want to set up? Why are we talking about this?
Yes. Yeah, so we've actually been talking about this for a while, various visioning about how best to use our resources. I think the presentation will say we've got, at least one building that is about to bust at the seams, and some other buildings with capacity. And we really want to make sure that we have a robust community discussion about how best to use the resources to serve both communities, and to serve obviously the students and the educational needs, so that way we can have excellent schools both in Roxbury and Montpelier and kind of throughout. And I think the goal for tonight is to get some background information and then decide on a process to both come up with some of the questions I think we want to ask as a district, and put a process in place to get broad community involvement, broad stakeholder involvement, and then move forward with some decisions to ensure that we've got, long-term solutions that serve the best interests of both communities.
And to add on, the purpose of tonight is to not get into trying to make decisions, which is hard for us all to do, I think. And then, so we'll do this presentation, which is relatively short, and then public comment, and then board discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay. So the question that we're putting towards the board right now is how do we best utilize the building resources of MRPS, so the physical buildings, to enrich the learning lives of our students? There's some merger information, just because I know that we have a relatively new board. This merger was completed in 2018 prior to my taking on as superintendent. So my first year as superintendent was the first year of the merged school district. And I just took out the information in the merger agreement that pertains to the buildings. MRPS purchased all district property from the cities of Montpelier and Roxbury for $1. Now, Kristen, I know you checked in with Tammy Legacy, and she doesn't know what the record is. Neither Grant nor I were involved with that, so we have to do some digging with some past.
Okay.
I don't know if Andrew knows it, but Andrew started the same year I did.
Right,
So
institutional memory.
exactly, it's a
Non-existent.
little lacking right now. So we just have to reach out to some former MRPS employees and
great.
see what we get. And I just got the information today, so I didn't have time to do it today. The current school buildings will continue. It says in the merger agreement, this is the exact language from the agreement. Current school buildings will continue to function as education facilities through June 30th, 2022, unless the majority of the electorate of the municipality agrees with a plan to close a school facility within its border prior to June 30th, 2022. Okay, so that's the exact language from. That's all there is really involving the physical building locations in that merger agreement. Actually, we have somebody who's on the, we might be able to
We
talk
have-
somebody.
we have
Two of them, all right.
Two buddies.
So maybe we need to pick your brains about that $1 thing. So that's all there is in the merger agreement regarding the physical locations for the physical locations of our school buildings. Current information, our enrollment right now, and this actually was updated yesterday with current enrollment information for RBS. Because we've gotten some kids who have come back into the school after last year. And so the number that the board originally saw when this presentation was sent to you wasn't accurate. The approximate per pupil expenditure in FY21, which is the fiscal year we are in currently, was for Roxbury, is $33,361 per pupil. The current enrollment coming into this current enrollment for school year 21 at the end of school year 21 was 28. Now coming into 2021-22, it's 37. So we're starting the year currently at 37 students here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So this school year, we'll start this building at approximately 75% capacity because the building can hold approximately 50 students in the 3 classrooms. At UES, it's $21,891 per pupil. The current enrollment at UES is 383 students. That was at the end of 21. So it could be a little bit larger because we had a year, much like in Roxbury, where kindergarten isn't a mandatory grade in Vermont. And so our kindergarten enrollment at UES is still pretty low compared to other years, but we may have a few more pupils there than what's listed there. But the last check we had was 383. It can hold about 500 kids in that building. And so right now UES is about 77% occupied. MSMS price per pupil for FY21 is $19,824. The current enrollment, this is again at the end of 21, and I know we've had more enrollments since then, was 372. So we are actually up from that right now. Our 7th and 8th grade in particular are bursting at the seams. And it can hold approximately 375 kids. So we're pretty much at 100% capacity for Main Street Middle School at the moment. And I should tell you the full capacity of students, we went back and forth as to how to, like, we were going to say, like, how many kids can fit in the square footage of each classroom. We went down that road for a while, and then we decided to look at the class size policy and say, what's the max amount of kids in a classroom that we say is an amount, and that's where we get these numbers. Okay, just so you know how we figured that out. That's why there's an amount there. At MHS, at our high school, the cost per pupil is $23,019. At the end of 21, we had 384 students there, and it can hold around 350 to 400 students. The reason why there's an around there with a dash is because high school is a different beast, and there's things like flexible enrollment, there's early college, kids are going to the tech center, like kids are in and out of that building, and they're not in one classroom all day long, or they're not in 3 or 4 classrooms all day long, they're in like 8, right? So it's just a different beast as to how many kids it can hold, which is why we have more of a range rather than a number for high school. And they're nearing 100% capacity. Finding space for district employees who need a place to hang their coat and, you know, put a computer and have a phone is getting pretty hard to do in our district. There's no space at the middle school to do that. And typically a lot of people are housed at MHS, and that is changing pretty rapidly. So we've got some space issues going on at Main Street Middle School and Montpelier High School right now, because we're busting at the seams in a lot of areas. Our staffing information, when Jim and I were talking about this, you thought it would be really interesting just to get the teacher turnover rates. So you can see the teacher turnover rates for both 2020 and 2001, keeping in mind that we're in a very odd time. We came off of a very odd year. So you can see the percentages there. Here at RVS, we had a 50% teacher turnover, and when it's teacher, it's professional licensed teacher. Okay, so this is not inclusive of instructional assistants or people of that nature. This is just professionally licensed teachers. At UES, there's 6% turnover. At NSMS, there's 13%, and at MHS, it's 12% turnover for this coming school year. So we got some new teachers coming in, which is exciting. General academic information. I am presenting, I think if you saw the yearly plan, I'm presenting, Mike Berry and I will be presenting a more in-depth look at our SBAC scores, I believe in 3 board meetings. We just got that information, but it's on that yearly calendar there. So it's coming soon. This is not in-depth information about the SBAC. I will tell you there is an asterisk for the 2021 scores. They may not be entirely accurate because not all kids took them. So the Agency of Education required that students take the SBAC in person. And we had, about 70 kids who said, nope, not coming in person. We're part of our virtual school. So they were recorded as zeros on our scores. And there's no kind of ability measures for these scores for SBAC, but that's why there's a little, we have to figure out how to use this data if we can at all. And how do we present it to the public is definitely a question. But these are just the overall proficiencies. So when it says District 3-4, remember that's UES's 3-4 because that's our only other grades 3 and 4 in the district. So you can see it from 2018, 2019. Students did not take the SBAC last year, so there is no scores available to us from last year. And keep in mind that the 2018, 2019 third graders would have been 5th graders this past year. So they're going into their 6th grade year. So they're very different cohorts that you're seeing between 2018-19 and 2020-21. So it's just something to keep in mind, which is why we have to really think about how we present this information. But those are our scores here.
And why did you say the scores were not available for RPS for those 2? 2021.
Yeah,
But they are available for Montpelier District 3-4.
can you hold questions till public comment?
Yeah, I'll make a list.
Yeah, please do, just so we get through the presentation. And we'll,
So decision points for the school board, that was just a very broad, quick data dump that we need lots more data, and that is very evident. That's just a very quick of where we are right now. So the purpose of this particular conversation for the school board is to determine a process for how to hold a larger community conversation regarding buildings. I think the school board will need to have lots of conversations around determining how to enable broad-based community engagement on the topic. So should there be a board committee? What would be the charge? Do we need a professional facilitator for the process? And I'd remind the board that in ESSER 2, we did put $40,000 out of ESSER 2 money to do that. So there is a good chunk of change available for the school district to hire a professional who really knows how to facilitate community engagement. What is the time frame for the decision-making process? What would be the decisions, which is not on here? And what questions does the board need to have answered right now in this process, either in regards to data that I can provide or just more information? So really that's all that I had planned for the board tonight, just in terms of information. The rest is just to start the discussion now.
So, yeah, let's open it up for public comment. Let's give it 10 minutes and see how we do. I'll tell you if you have some questions. And where's the best part to just take people where they're sitting? And please announce your name before comment.
And just speak toward the owl loudly.
Let's speak towards the owl.
The owl.
That's
My name's Tom Fraser. I'm a resident here in Roxbury. I just had a couple of questions about the numbers. You see that the current enrollment for 2021 is expected to be 37 over 28. That's good news in terms of per pupil cost. It's more closely in line with the Union Elementary School. The other thing is, why do you think there's 50% teacher turnover? Why is the turnover rate so high in this school versus other schools? Is that due to the management? You get a lot of comments. We own the greenhouse next door, so we get a lot of people. Is it the management, or what's your reasoning for that? I mean, these after all, let's fall in your lap, I would say.
questions.
Tom, did you have another question?
I'll take that one for right now.
Okay. I think there's probably, I don't want to make assumptions of staffing turnover because I'm not making that decision. However, I can say I know in year 2020, when there was 38% staff turnover, that 2 professionals transferred to Union Elementary. So we had a contract that any professional staff member, when there's an opening, professional staff members in our district have first dibs if they are licensed to hold that position. And so we had 2 teachers who worked here, who went to Union Elementary, or one went to middle school and one went to Union to teach there. Now, actually, our middle school teachers coming back to Lorelei Duke is coming back to the Roxbury to teach the 3-4 class. However, that still equates to teacher turnover, because it's not a continuous line. So that's the reason why I know the 2020 turnover. In terms of the 2021, we're talking about a very low number of teachers here because we don't have many professional staff, with 9 professional staff. Not all of them are full-time. One retired, one decided to leave the field of education and go into more environmental issues. One was on an emergency, she was hired in an emergency regard, and that term was up. So we had lots of different, this year just was not normal in that term. So that's the reason why we have a higher percentage this year.
So you expect that to settle out?
I don't know, honestly, because the 2000, so my first year superintendent was 2018, 2019. And we don't have the 1920 data on here, but we certainly had turnover then too. So I'm not sure. I don't know if we have enough years as a merged district to be able to see any kind of trend there.
I thought about that 50% number and was wondering, you know, if 50% of the teachers represents how many teachers?
There's 9.
Okay, so I mean, it can be a matter of 3 or 4 teachers, which makes that percentage look really stark.
Good start.
Yeah.
You got 3 or 4 employees and 3 leave, 5 leave.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, it's, there's lots of reasons, obviously, but
Is that anything else?
yeah, I had one other question about the why the information was not available for the testing for the RPS when it was for the district.
The testing information is available if there weren't any kids who were proficient.
There weren't any kids who were proficient in the out of the 28.
No, those are only 3rd and 4th graders. Only 3rd and 4th graders take us back in this building.
Class size is pretty small.
Class, and that represents a very small number of children. So
Well, maybe I'm out of line here, but that just seems to be. I mean, I don't know how many kids those are. I know there are a lot of kids in town that have a lot of problems. There are a lot of smart kids too. I don't see how that number could be 0. And there again, that seems to me to go back to the staffing. How could it not? How could it not?
I believe there's a correlation there too.
And you know, my grandchildren are going to be coming to school next year. Included in 37 and up. This just really concerns me. I mean, I've been involved in this school for 50 years. These are really stark numbers. And you guys got a lot of work to do. It's not going to be closing the school.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why we're here. Other comments or questions?
I guess I'll start.
Yeah, great.
I'll break the ice. Kimmy Crookshank. I have 2 kids in the district. I'm a Roxbury resident. My youngest is going into 2nd grade. My oldest will be going into 6th grade at Main Street. I'm here to hear more information. What's the process? Are you guys thinking of turning this into a special ed building for the district? Like what is the overall goal? Because we all are here, we are all taxpayers, we all have, some have young kids coming in, some have kids transferring out. I hear Tom's issues as well. I've been here since my kid was in kindergarten. And, you know, I've seen her class was the biggest class. They had 10 kids. They migrated out, and then Gracie's class has, what, 5, 6? And they have to merge them. So I'll tell you, last year, straight out sucked. That class was a disaster. And I'll say it to all of you. There was problems after problems after problems. When my kid comes and says that she's hiding under a desk because there are boys that are like pulling and just being rude, that is a problem. So I don't think it's a building issue. I think it's a staffing issue. And coming in and making sure that the kids behave, manners and behave, respectful. That is the problem in this building. That is the problem, I think, why staff leave. That is the problem of low-income families and some not having the behavior and respect that some of us others enforce. So my point is, what's going to happen with this building come next June?
I think the goal of tonight is to put a process in place to ask and answer that question in addition to, other questions and how that relates to.
Okay, so what is the process?
That's what we're gonna figure out.
Okay, so when is that going to be figured out?
I think we're gonna start having that discussion after public comment and try to put in place at least the first steps to get that process moving.
So by next meeting, we'll see it on virtual of what that process is.
We certainly hope to get it moving as soon as possible. I want to have tonight's discussion occur before I make promises about what the next meeting is going to look like. But
Because I'm curious to see what that outline is. If it's going to impact me, the rest of these people here, the taxpayers, like it ultimately comes down to me saying, is it worth staying in this district or going to a different district? And then your numbers are low again, because that's 2 kids pulled out. So, and that's me. So what about all the other families? We are trying our best to make this work, but every year there is a problem. There's always a bus issue. There's always a staffing issue. There is just one thing after another. And I'm sorry to just get it all out to you guys, but I feel like we never start early. You guys are always 6 steps behind the ball. Sorry, I've seen it 2 years in a row where the bus issue turns into a hot mess, and I'm just waiting for August 25th to come around and to say, oh, bus isn't going to be there. Just saying. I'll be done now. Get off my soapbox.
no, we hear you.
I'm Matt Williams. I have 3 kids in the district. And I'm curious whether or not it's possible to hear possibilities. There's a space issue in Montpelier. There's a cost per student issue here. There are other problems here. There are behavioral problems and performance problems, retention problems. I'm just, I'm not pushing anything. I'm curious whether or not any possibilities will be voiced at all this evening, and whether or not a bunch of options will appear at any time in the next, month or 2 months. I have no idea how long a process like this would take because I have no idea what is being considered. Although I can imagine, which is probably not a good idea. So is there any possibility that any possible solutions, or not solutions, but options, just potential options will be, voiced this evening?
I think we probably won't get deep into it, but I think in terms of some of the questions the board would want, I'm sure a quick examination of options and possibilities is going to be Done?
Could I weigh in?
Okay.
So just to set in context, this visioning process was gonna happen before COVID. We were about to launch. I think at least one survey did go out and everything got canceled because obviously the pandemic. So part of what we're deciding tonight is the community will be included in those possibilities. So when you say possibilities, we'll be taking feedback from community members about what vision should be. So I just wanted to make that clear that hopefully you will all be involved and give your input into that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. This is a process we wanted to start 15 to 18 months ago. And that, the pandemic, I think, is a good excuse, but we apologize for the fact that it's late because it's a needed conversation.
Sounds like the process is going to take place pretty quickly. It has to be done before June, right?
It doesn't have to be done before June. That's just in the merger as to when decisions can be made after that date, but it doesn't have to be done by
So
then.
I just asked that the board sends out communications to the public well in advance of whatever the next step is. Tonight's a prime example. 2 of us here in this room were notified today via Facebook post that this meeting is occurring. So having a more advanced notice posted via email, I didn't receive an email on the meeting, would be helpful to have community feedback, because you're gonna have a very small audience without that proactive communication on the process and scheduling. I highly recommend a survey somewhere along the way. It'd be helpful if you engage the community to maybe have some input on what questions are asked in that survey. You can see there's quite a bit of concern here amongst parents, and some might not be comfortable to talk tonight in a public setting, so it'd be beneficial to have that feedback.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
I'm sorry, Melissa Nguyen, and I have and 73-year-olds in Roxbury.
Third grade.
Oh, sorry, third grade.
They're awful big. but
Yes, they are.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was
Third
like,
grade.
Third grade.
Thank you.
I can say something quick. I'm Melissa Rutter. I currently have a third grader, but I have a preschooler who's currently in the Northfield School District for preschool, but will be here next year in 2 years. So my concern to me is seeing that date, that June 30th date, and what it means for my kindergartner. I'm obviously concerned about the current school year and all the issues that can be brought up. My daughter was in that same classroom. I understand we do not have the same teacher. She will also be in Ms. Duke's class, so I have a little less angst about the teacher situation, but last year was not fun at all, period. And it wasn't COVID related. It was purely the classroom environment. Obviously we have the bus issue, which I hope will not be an issue this year. But the bigger question is the community. I have a big concern if the decision is to, ultimately, if the determination is to close this school, sending my kindergartner on a bus at 10:07 in the morning to Montpelier every day just doesn't sit well with me. Obviously, it is what it is. When they get to 5th grade, they're older and it works better. But that's my biggest concern is the younger group, kindergarten, 1st grade, and what that means for them, because that's a long day. And we already have bus issues with just the little route it does. I can't imagine sending all those kids on that bus to Montpelier. So that's my opinion.
Just that one other frustration or concern I have with the school today is the lack of special education services within this school building. Last year it was piecemeal, partly because of COVID, but also because of limited staffing and no special educator that was able to be hired for the school year. This year, I'm understanding we hired a 0.5 preschool and a 0.5 special educator. She has no certification in special ed. And I've been told by the principal she has no background in special ed, but yet she was hired to fill that position. I have a child on an IEP, and I was told she's going to be shadowing a special educator in Roxbury or Montpelier, but that person won't be coming out here. So essentially it leaves parents feeling like our kids are being used as beta testers for this new hire that just came in with no special education background. And if we're merged, it would make sense that someone would be coming from the Montpelier School District with a special education certification and providing services to our kids who are on IEP. It's federal law. So.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I mean, the June 30th date, the biggest significance of that is that the process for closure of any building would shift from a vote to the regular statutory process.
The regular what?
Statutory process.
Meaning,
I mean, I think the board. So. And the state board. Yeah.
So I'm Tina Muncy.
Nice and loud, Tina.
Pardon?
Nice and loud.
Oh, I'm Tina Muncy. Sorry. Speak to the owl, right? And I'm the other side of this merger. I live in Montpelier. I used to be on the school board and I was part of the merger committee. And maybe more important, I was a principal of a small school and I love small schools. Having said that, I am really concerned about these figures in that it costs $10,000 a student more each year to educate a student in Roxbury. And by the way, scores aren't good.
For what?
Scores aren't good. So the system, the way I'm looking at it, is something about the system's not working. And I think what the board's trying to say is today they're trying to figure out a system to figure out what would work. And my concern, Jim's talked about it, but my concern is it's going to take time. In order for the people of Roxbury to have a say, for the people of Montpelier to have a say, your taxes have been going down. Mine, on the other hand, have been going up for this merger. So when you think about that, people in Montpelier have an opinion on this too. So I'm sure the board would like to know actually from you, I'm speaking for you, so, you know, how it is we would get people from Roxbury to speak up. How would you get people? And I can say this because when I was on the board and we came to Roxbury, unless there was a big issue, nobody came. Now, to be fair, in Montpelier, unless there's a big issue, nobody comes. That's the way school boards work, right? But in this case, it's a big issue. It's a big issue for all of us. So I think collectively, we need to figure out what's the way we get people's input. And you're asking for possibilities. Maybe you have some that they haven't thought of. So we need to think about what will we do in this situation? And historically, you have a lot fewer kids in the building than you had before, right? And as a principal of a small school, I can say the smaller it gets, the harder it is to educate. And the reason for that is because you can't get people to come for point two. You can't find people that are certified because they have to make a living by putting that all together. And sometimes it's really hard to find good people that come to a small school. And I say that honestly, loving small schools. I think they're wonderful. I've had my say. Yes.
I just had a question based on what you just said. These teachers or professionals, whatever, they're not getting paid based on a student.
No.
I mean, you say they don't want to come out here for one kid. Well, what's it to them?
You're saying for like part-time.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't say that. I
Part-time.
mean, for not the class, well, in some cases, classroom teachers, I don't know if all the classroom teachers here now are full-time, but your other positions are all part-time because you're a small school.
For the school district as big as this one combined with Montpelier, they're still part-time.
Yes.
The teachers that work or the in Montpelier, the people you're talking about are part-time.
The people in Montpelier are full-time because there are a lot of kids, but there are
But
not
we're
many.
part of the same district.
Right, we're merged.
The road goes back and forth.
Right, but so
No
let's,
buts about it. That's the way it works.
yes, but let's talk about the practicality of that. So you have a teacher, some sort of a professional that needs to be here 2 hours a day. Because that's how many kids you have, and that's what's needed. So even if you hire that teacher to also do something in Montpelier, and they're not working with students, right? If that's the way you hire them, and time to come back if they work here. It's all I'm saying, it's a difficult situation.
But don't you understand that that is what the result of this bastardized union is? I mean, you know, having two districts so far apart, I mean, that's just one of the things we have to accept. That people are going to spend time on the road and maybe they're not going to be, you know, at their greatest potential during that time. But, you know, that's the way it is. We have a need. It's a district-wide need. This is not a separate entity here. This is part of the district. You're going to remember that we were fully contained here. We didn't really feel like we needed to do anything until we were forced into it by the state. And we gave up. Our school was paid for, and now we're co-signed on a $9 million note, you know, in addition to having all these other problems. So don't tell me that these people can't, they have to be part-time or anything else, you know?
In fairness,
all in
both
district.
communities voted to merge.
Yeah, of course, they had to. They had no choice. It was forced upon us. And we're happy to be with Montpelier. But we expect it to be treated as a full unit too, not to be, you know, shunted off into the, on the backside of the burner.
Absolutely.
But that's what's happening. And this is just the kind of greasing the skids here tonight.
Alana, and then see if other comments brought to the board discussion.
Is there any other?
Did you remember?
Yeah, there are, you know, to me, the home environment is the greatest predictor of success in school. And so, but if I had to work for 0.5, if I'm trying to drive back and forth, that's why we're gonna have this kind of turnover. You know, people aren't gonna stay in a situation where they have to drive back and forth. They're gonna be applying for permanent positions. And I think that, you know, we can't undo the fact that the merger has occurred. Whatever this, if I had a job for half the week in one place and I had to drive 30 minutes through the snow, I'd be looking for another job the following year. That's just the way it is.
Well, it sounds to me like that's the way it's designed at this point. Yeah, they're riding the
Just
bus.
in front.
So I do have a question. Montpelier gets full special ed services by certified special ed. Roxbury doesn't. Same district. Why?
So how many kids do we have in our school that are special ed? Or can you not
Answer that because it's below the end size.
Identify.
So I think that is my main concern. Like, my kids are not obviously special ed. One was borderline when she was here. But because of the merger, she was not IEP specialized. So they just pretty much shuffled her to the side, even though she was behind math for 3 grades. That was, you know, just shuffle along. And she is obviously getting the help that she needs at mainstream middle school. But it's because mom is also doing the side work. So I think part of the issue, and a lot of these kids in this school have home issues. Like, obviously, you're not going to get those people's engagement. And those are the ones that matter. Because those are the parents that are just shuffling their kid and they don't even get out of here.
Can I, so first I want to just thank you all for being here today. I think part of our role as board members is to hear you, so that all these things that we hear from community will bring back to ask the questions in the school board meeting. I want to make sure that we are respectful of all the communities in this district, including here for them. If the families don't have the time, effort, whatever we want to call it, we're still here for the kids. And whatever decisions that we make, we are here for those kids who are not behaving, those kids who are having problems, those kids that don't have food and might not be engaging in the classroom as we want or like have. So I think it's really important to just have them in our hearts when we're making these decisions. We know that this districts in the state are suffering for not having a lot of teachers, certified teachers. There's a shortage on teacher workforce in the state. So it's a problem that we have to deal with, but it's not that we are the only district that is having these issues right now. So just to have that. And the community involvement is really important. We're willing to go and sit down on the road, have coffee and like wait with signs to hear from the people. Like we've talked about that, Kristen is very committed as a representative of this Roxbury district, so whatever it takes for us to listen to your concerns, for us to be, because we are the bridge between the work of the district and the community. So if we don't have your voice, then we are just listening from that gap. So I think, so thank you again, and we hope to hear you, and my number and my email is on the website.
I don't think I could have articulated it any better. I just want to echo that. I think that we can't know what you're experiencing unless there is a schedule, there's a set calendar for the entire year as to when our school board meetings are happening. Every single school board meeting is an open meeting that starts off with public comment where your questions, concerns, frustrations, praises can be heard. So I encourage folks to take advantage of that. I mean, I almost would say we're like standing room only right now in terms of our public participation. I know it's a small room, but I still think it's pretty awesome. So I'm really happy to see, and even though it's hard things to hear, and I'm hearing that folks are really frustrated, I am happy to hear them, because we can do nothing unless we hear from you, and that is the very function of such an open meeting. So I made a motion a couple weeks ago about, I don't know what the best way is to do that. I don't know how, we'd have to figure out and just make sure that they're in a visible place. But I would also just encourage you to go ahead and go to the MRPS website here in that connection. So if you can't get here physically, you can still participate. But I think I'm a new board member only by a few months. I'm really learning about what my role and what my responsibilities are. But clearly it is about community engagement. Like, we are the bridge from you all. Look forward to continuing to hear from you and supporting what's best for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that we're fortunate outside of the pandemic, is we've learned to use Zoom, so we should have most of our Montpelier meetings on Zoom as well too, which gives you both the opportunity to typically the first and third Wednesday of every month. Good change. We should probably move to board discussion. I'm not sure how best to structure this. I think what we want to focus on is getting the framework of a process in place. Some of the questions I have, and hear others. Do we need some sort of facilitator to help us do this? How do we best do community outreach? And is this best handled through creation of a special committee kind of shadowing me?
Yeah, I have some questions. I want to echo the sentiments of Kristen and Amanda too. And just, it's really nice to have people actually physically present and telling us your perspective, because as a board member that's also relatively new, but I've been on for about a year, a little over a year now. I haven't heard from the Roxbury community super loudly. We did hear a little bit around the busing problem, but I didn't hear any hearing that it actually turned into a problem.
Sounds
So
like it's not bubbling up because the principal was contacted weekly by all of
yeah,
us.
I mean, I would
So it's
just
not bubbling up to
encourage,
Libby, or if it is and it's not going to you.
I would
it's been
encourage
voiced.
continued communication to school board members, and all of our emails are listed publicly on the website. So if something becomes a frustration for you and you're not getting the feedback that you want from the administration, then I would encourage you to always CC all of us on it, just so that we can follow along with what's happening in Roxbury, because we don't hear a lot from the community in the process. But as far as I know, and this is just my perspective as somebody that's only been on the board for a little over a year, is that tonight really is day one in this process. And tonight is the first time that I'm hearing of the June 30th date, actually. So I don't know what that process looks like myself. So you're here on the ground level of this process, and you're probably the most important stakeholder. The Roxbury Village community is going to be, in my perspective, probably the most. And what are we coming into? Are we coming into a community who loves their school and wants to make sure that they preserve it exactly the way that it is? Or are we coming from a school that 50% of the parents want to send their kids to union school? Or I just really don't know. And so it's really important for people to voice their feelings on it. So if there's any way for you to form a community coalition, a group of people that meets regularly, also, it's very important. So I really appreciate you all being here, and it's been insightful to hear your stories. So I guess that's my first question, is what is the June 30th date, and what exactly does that mean?
So the June 30th date, I mean, the biggest thing is basically when the merger came, there was a discussion about possible school closure. And it was just basically without the vote of an electorate for 4 years. So basically, either community could protect any of their process, which I'm not totally sure, but my understanding is it would be a recommendation from the board, and then we'd have to get approval from the state board. So it could happen.
Okay, that's state board.
Yes.
Can I talk a related question onto that? Okay, so that's,
Yeah, so if we were to close Union, the city of Montpelier would have to vote to approve the vote.
Okay, and then if RBS.
If RVS, yeah, the residents would not. Well, exactly. So essentially Roxbury would have a veto over the closure of RVS
And to be,
Until June.
up until 2:30.
Right.
honestly, it's a moot point, because we're not.
Yeah.
Right, I mean,
I'm
with that.
sorry, I got confused. The school closure will be voted by the board and then, oh,
I've not heard any talk among any of these board members or even the community asking us to close the school. So I don't think that that timeline is anything to be concerned about as far as what my experience has been on this board. It's a very thoughtful, deliberate board that's not going to like railroad any decision through, especially not something this critical and important and you know, changing the fabric of your community within a year. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, and as a Montpelier resident, had a long-standing board member, someone served on the merger committee. You know, my sense is that support in Montpelier for both the merged district and for the school and the community of Roxbury are very high. You know, that said, I think, you know, as we look towards the future and some of the numbers that we put out, we definitely want to improve the performance of RVS. And from, you know, hearing things tonight, it sounds like, you know, and I've been hearing this through other channels, you know, there are issues that need to be addressed. And, you know, we want to have that be part of this process to make sure that, you know, when we come back in a year or 2 years, the stories we're hearing are increased enrollment, you know, fantastic educational experiences, you know, just, you know, not some issues that we're hearing tonight. So that's the, yeah.
you're muted, Mia.
Yeah.
Thank you. Has everyone else gone who wanted? Oh, well, I guess I'm next on the list. I'll just chime in that absolutely, I think we should hire a facilitator to hold this process. I think that's the best way to get it done in a really thoughtful and thorough way, in a way that a facilitator is, I think, the person who could ensure that all those that we get that input from community members, whether they are the kind of people who show up at school board meetings and can show up at school board meetings, or the kind that can or don't. And I think, and one thing that I'm realizing is going to be really, really critical, and I know we're, you know, whatever decision we land on is not going to please every single person in our school community, but I would really love for us to see, to hold this process in a way that brings our community together, our full school community together, rather than divides us. And I think that we need someone to hold the process in order for that to happen. I think if we as a board were trying to do it ourselves, I would be concerned that wouldn't be possible. So I definitely wanted to just answer that one question, one of the questions that was at the end of Libby's presentation with, from my perspective, yes, we definitely need to hire a facilitator. I have a couple of questions as well. Are we in this conversation and in this process focusing only on RVS, or is it a holistic view of all district properties? And I guess and maybe that can't be answered tonight, but I have a little bit of confusion around what the focus is. You know, that first, I thought that first slide, Libby, was very helpful, because I think that actually does bring it up to the bigger picture, and that this isn't just about RVS and Roxbury, but it's a way of thinking about how are we using all of our facilities in a way that bolster students' learning. But then I also feel a little bit of concern that this is really, the focus is only going on RVS. So maybe that's not something that can be answered tonight, but I'll just pause there to see if someone does have thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I'll answer though, because I think this absolutely has to do with all of the buildings. I mean, I think obviously we have a situation at RVS that maybe is more urgent than some of the other buildings, but as you've seen, there's a need in the middle school to find more space. I think a process that looks holistically at solutions that, is there just throwing out there is an ability to bring kids from Montpelier to Roxbury, because this is a fantastic location. I mean, it's a gorgeous building. It's a relatively new building. It's got outdoor and other amenities that we don't have in our more urban spaces in Montpelier. Is there a way to attract Montpelier students out here to, fill up some of the vacant space at this school, maybe with higher numbers get some other improvements as well. So I think, looking at that whole question is very important. I think, we want to look at RBS from a district-wide perspective and with the other resources that we have as a district.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, so I would say like, yes, for a facilitator, but I think maybe multiple facilitators. I think that there are two things. One is a conversation about, no outside facilitator is gonna know what Roxbury does and is, right? Like, so if we could find somebody from inside Roxbury, it would be ideal to at least guide that person, someone that can get paid from the community to advise this facilitator how the process, how the community, walks and talks, so that we could, like, where are the spaces where people are at, so that we could do that community engagement in a very holistic way. I think there's also the conversation around not only the space in the building, but what are the issues that are happening. So, rate, like SBAC rate, special ed, and looking at that through that lens, because I think that's really important. It's not just the building. It's like, if we don't have special educators that are like working, if our kids are having issues in terms of the teacher workforce, that says a lot about how we move forward. So I think, like, yes, the facilitators, but maybe a couple, and maybe like being able to hire someone from Roxbury that can advise us into how to support the community in this conversation. Because I think someone from the outside doesn't have what we need, really, unless you live and breathe.
So one question. Is it possible, since the whole COVID thing has put everything on hold for 15 months, that you could move this June 30th date back 15 months? Petition the state Department of Education or whatever, change that date so that we don't feel pressurized to turn everything over to the 7th of June.
We don't have to do
Yeah, we don't-
anything by June 30th.
Yeah, we don't do anything by June
No,
30th.
but legally by June 30th, the community loses all control. Literally. Because we have one or two members, I'm not sure, you guys
Two.
both voting members? Yeah, so we have 2 out of the 7 or 8 or however many there are. So we literally lose all control of our education process as of June 30th. Literally. So if we could get that moved back 15 months, at least it would give people time. I mean, I didn't even know about this meeting until I saw Kristen's front porch forum post. I mean, why is it such a secret? And what good is it to have a year's worth of dates when you're going to have meetings when there's no agendas attached to those dates? People come to meetings based on the agenda material that's going to be discussed. I mean, people go to select board meetings when the roads are going to be discussed. They come here when the whatever, So what is it? Why is it so hard to get that information out? Front Porch Forum has been around for a while, and everybody reads it. In Northfield, Roxbury, people can read the Montpelier Forum, or you can post it on the Roxbury Forum if that's not too much to ask. I mean, the agenda, the whole bit. I mean, if you hadn't done it, there would have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think this prompts just a conversation amongst the board of how we're getting information to community members about when meetings are happening and what the content is. I mean, I would agree with you in that, Front Porch Forum is just sort of like the new town crier, right? I mean, it's what everybody reads and takes in. And so that's, a great just kind of megaphone, that's
That's the
available.
only one we have.
Yeah, so I think that's worthy of consideration. And there is an agenda that is attached to each meeting. It doesn't come out months and months in advance. The agendas come out on the Friday before the upcoming Wednesday meeting. So the agenda and the supporting meeting documents and resources are all publicly available to folks. But I think what you're highlighting is that we could do a better job of letting folks know when meetings are.
Busy, they don't have time to research all this, decide what meeting to go to.
Jill?
Get mine.
Yeah.
Well, what
Uh,
about the legal question of setting that date back? I mean, it sounds like that's,
I think we'd have to probably go through like a vote to amend the merger agreement, and I don't know, unless people feel differently, I think the chance of the school closing, any school closing by June 30th, 2022, or frankly, June 30th, 2025 is pretty close to zero. I don't think there's any talk in other communities.
no, I agree.
About-
I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if there would be something that we could do to sort of publicly indicate. And I get Tom's point about it's out of the community's hand at that point, because after that date, it would be a vote by the board and then the state board, and then it wouldn't go to a vote of the town. And so if that would be something that we could legally amend, I would be open to that, because I agree with you
I mean, we
that
could
I
tie our
don't think
own
the
hands.
board is in any rush to make this happen any sooner than that. So
And I agree with Tom that community is gonna want control, and that we should find a way to make that piece at piece.
Yeah.
Even if we don't intend to do that, it's always, because it's legal, we should, because we are behind, it is our responsibility to ensure that that system is. Do you wanna check with the state board? Like,
would it be a HR conversation or would that be?
Yeah, I mean, we could tie our own hands. We could just take a vote that we won't.
Oh, yeah,
School
we could
closure
just-
until,
Commit.
I don't think that's.
yeah,
I
But
don't think
that's not the
question is
point.
School closure, he's concerned about the voting.
That it would be allowed to go to a vote. I
Yeah.
mean, right, like,
we could certainly look into it. My guess is that we probably need whatever process is needed for. Because this was like well, but it went through the whole Act 46 process, and I think to change any part of it, you have to kind of redo the Act 46 process.
And it was publicized at the time of the merger.
Yeah.
so we could make some sort of motion tonight to,
But again, we have the pandemic that delayed it, so.
but I mean, to say that we won't take any action to close any of our schools with, and push it out however long we wanted to push it out, if we wanted to make a motion tonight, but that wouldn't alleviate Tom's concern about it going to a public vote.
Yeah.
But we could at least do that as sort of until we are able to get legal counsel on that other question.
Yeah.
I mean, I
I
definitely
can, I
want
can
to,
check to what some of the. So I'll take responsibility for checking what the legal avenue would be and what would need to happen. And then we can discuss them for that piece on the community. control.
and I'm just interested in indicating our patience on moving any process forward, and that we want to have a process with fidelity and stakeholder input, and would have no interest in doing it by 6/30/2022. So I just want to make sure to be able to, if there's anything that we can do tonight to, make that promise to the Roxbury community. I think that would be nice.
I'll agree with Jim. If you make a committee and get a facilitator and start the discussion, we'll be lucky to come to any kind of.
Right.
It will take probably longer than that to even come to a conclusion. And once you come to the conclusion in June, Libby had to plan the year way in advance of that. So, it's going to be another year at the very least.
Right.
It takes a long time.
Jill,
I don't have an answer to all of that. But I did just want to say a few things while I had the floor. You know, I think, as Emma pointed out, there's no preconceived notion here. I actually didn't really see this as the agenda item it has become. I'm really glad we're having this conversation because frankly, what I've heard tonight has become my number one concern. I think we all come at this from our own lens. So for me, this past year, having my kids at the middle school went really well. I was really upset about the wasp infestation that was continuing in her classroom. So that was like what was right in front of my face. But to hear that there are concerns about things that are coming up in a month or two about busing and special education and behavior is beyond the scope of this larger committee building long-term plan. That thing has to happen, but I want to make sure that we are taking your concerns seriously about the things that are happening now to your kids right now. I will never forget, we had a parent come a couple months ago. One person had her piece about how we had failed her son, and it still sticks with me. So I don't want to lose track of those more immediate things that might also have more immediate and doable resolutions, and lose that in this bigger sort of what are we going to do with our buildings, what's our community, who's happy about where we're at, who's not. So I just wanted to make that point, you know, that I have heard some community members who are very concerned about the numbers we saw. I'm really concerned about the scores and things, knowing that there's more to that story, but to hear that clearly your kids aren't getting what they need and the system that we have isn't working is point number one that I've heard tonight. And that I need to look beyond my little bubble about middle school being a not great place for drop off and busing and they have nowhere to play. This is a beautiful school. It was really neat to come down here and see that. But I'm really sad to hear that it's not working. So I feel like we almost need to separate those two things and make sure that we are sort of prioritizing the experience of the kids and the staff here at the school this fall to make sure that it's a little bit more successful. And then, you know, and then that longer term concern, we can't really make these decisions in isolations. There definitely isn't a preconceived notion. I genuinely would want to hear if you guys have ideas about what's going to happen or what would work better for your children. I have no preconceived notion about the answer, but I know that simply closing the building doesn't eliminate problems. And I also know that, you know, other schools are busting at the seams. So you know, you squeeze the system one side here, something else happens. So I think Tina articulated best by saying what we're doing right now isn't working. So let's talk about solving that. But I also just wanted to make sure we don't lose sight of these like really immediate concerning pieces and that the principal hears this and that the teachers are given what they need to provide that better experience for your kids. And that you don't have to worry about how your kindergartner is going to get on a bus in a month. I have a 13-year-old now. She doesn't want me to help her do anything, but I absolutely like your concerns have now become incredibly important to me. And I was not aware of that. So thank you for telling us.
So in terms of next steps, there seems to be relative agreement on a facilitator. We started the process really working with Susan and Keisha, right?
Yeah, we had gotten an early proposal, whatever, like 15 months ago.
Yeah.
So we have to, I'd probably start over.
For a while.
Yeah, probably define the requirements and yeah, basically.
So we have like other RFP.
We didn't do one.
Oh, we didn't.
No, we just got one early proposal and then
Okay.
stuff happened.
I'm also wondering if what needs to precede the RFP is just a really clear articulation of our purpose.
Yeah.
You know, our process, obviously, I mean, the community is really going to inform the process, but our purpose, and I think that's frankly a lot of what brought you all here tonight, is that the purpose felt really unclear. So I think that we maybe as a board need to really clarify that, and maybe that's where the committee comes in.
I think we still might have some documentation about that, because we did talk about what we want out of it. At least we started that.
And maybe, and this is an opportunity for some historical context without going on and on, but was the process that was initiated last there specific to RVS, and is that different than what we're doing now? So it was
it was about the vision for both schools to bring the schools closer together, to think outside the box. And
Yeah,
using the buildings, what's the vision for
Through
For the
chief.
one unit instead of having two divided communities.
Exactly.
Sorry, Mia, can you hear? Can you hear? Oh, I was,
That's
oh,
okay, thank you.
so we need a committee.
Yeah, it sounds like we need, I mean, do you want to charge an existing board committee to come up with the charge, or?
I'm looking at Jill,
I'm
just
feeling
slightly
so
side
committed
eyeing you.
out.
Oh,
I want
yeah.
you to be the committee. And I feel like we need to.
I
there's
would-
a
I
few
might-
levels to this. I think the
My thing would be
facilities
housing
committee
into
might
it,
make
because-
sense
That's why I'm side
in
eyeing
some
you.
capacity, but there's clearly other stuff that is not, that would not just be the facilities. committee. But as far as like taking an inventory about our facility resources and possibilities, I know when I first, I've only been on the board a year, but when we were first together, it was right before COVID hit. We were talking about the middle school because that building is in a crisis, and what the options are. Do we close the middle school and move those kids to a new building at the high school? No, that doesn't work because X, Y, Z. So there's moving pieces and parts that I absolutely think would have to be part of the conversation. So you and I are two-thirds of the.
You guys
I
as
know.
a building committee, yeah, I mean, they could come up with, could you come up with a charge, or would you be willing to do that?
I don't know if that's the purpose of that committee.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like
we
we're
need
talking
a-
about
a special
educational
committee?
opportunities
Yeah.
committee. That's a much bigger conversation than the building.
Mhm.
If I
Um,
may, the original intent behind the original proposal was the idea that when I win the Powerball and I retire immediately, that you all have a vision for this district, right? It has to start there. And the vision statement that's on our letterhead sounds very nice. And I think it was wordsmithed across a board meeting and a half. Is that fair?
It's fair.
And it didn't involve a whole lot of community members other than board members. And so the whole intent there was to start there and then come down to, and how do we get to that vision using the resources that we have in the district?
Well, if you win the Powerball, you better have a succession plan. The next day. That's the next one, but I'm hearing a lot of things because I'm thinking the equity committee is thinking a lot about community engagement. So it can naturally go in there in terms of, so because I feel like now there are 4 different conversations. One is vision, one is like the building capacity, and like the other one is like what are the equity issues that we're having with children with IEP or like behavioral. Then there is the issue about how do we engage in the community that is both in Montpelier and Roxbury. So I think for the purpose of this conversation and from that you guys are here is like, how do we engage the Roxbury community, not only about the school closure, but about the issues.
There is no school closure. I
Not,
just want.
well, yeah, about the non-school closure of
Okay,
the
yeah.
school. About the June 30th and all the conversation that we're having today. So I think that is, so I think that kind of fits in the equity committee in terms of the community engagement. And the facilities has its own.
For the chart, would it be possible to, I guess, can we engage the facilitator and help determine the scope actually of what we want to do? Because I feel like, at least, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but time is always an issue. This is something that really requires focus and time and somebody who's maybe a professional to coordinate the conversation in a way that's your job to do. Whereas, it's me, like, oh, I have 10 minutes, can I quickly do something? I don't feel like that would be a fair way to do it, and maybe other people have more. I feel like it's a really important conversation, and the beginning of it is critical. Building the foundation is critical. So I just don't want us to do that in any.
Yeah, no, that's my sense. I mean, when we did the Act 46 committee, obviously we had guidance from the state about how it's supposed to, and then we had Steve Dale facilitate, and it was, yeah, it was a committee with, strong representation from both communities, but with Steve scoping it out and keeping everyone on task and doing.
There's a definitive process that was
Yeah.
defined for you.
It was defined for us, which made it a lot easier. I mean, I think we could come up with a similar process, but we'd have to embed it ourselves.
Yeah, so even if it wasn't the same person, just a person who would, because as you know, you have to take notes, you have to,
We research,
you have to put those into some kind of report
volunteerism.
form. I mean, all these things take hours and hours to do, so. Yeah.
I think you need, it's a big enough question that you need a committee for just this.
That's my
And you
thought.
need a facilitator to do it. And if I ran the world, I would say the board needs to decide the purpose of it. But then the committee needs to have on it a couple board members and community members from both Montpelier and Roxbury who would represent the community and go out and try to figure out what's needed. That'd be my.
So it sounds like we need somebody to write. You were saying that we would want a purpose defined before we would hire the facilitator, so that the facilitator would know what they're getting into before. And I am happy to take Amanda and the equity committee up on at least drafting that, and then it could come back to us perhaps on the August 4th. Could it come back by August 4th, maybe?
There's our chair, Mia Moore. I keep adding things to the equity.
I'm not the chair. I'm not the chair. But we could, yeah,
And then we can still
we
vote
sure
on.
could.
Yeah.
And then maybe the
facilitator.
facilitator with some committee members could actually write a draft charge for us to vote on, but the purpose would be defined ahead of time before hiring. Facilitator? Does that sound-
Jill has anything that works.
I'll be quick.
I agree completely with what you said, because what I'm hearing tonight is not about buildings, it's about educational outcomes and
Yeah.
experiences for these kids. And so the building, the physical stuff is the last piece of that, once we've actually set our goal for making sure we're providing those. That, I do think it is an equity issue like that
Yeah.
tonight, so I think you're right on, and I think the building is tertiary, that's a supply thing that is available once we have carved out the educational outcome issues.
So I think it's like the purpose and then an RFP to hire a facilitator. And the RFP process is like, could be the development of it, could be a collaboration between some community members with like brainstorming what is the need for this RFP. And like drafting that to come to, you know.
So I'm looking at the schedule. The 4th, we've got ESSER 3 and tract funding options, which is going to be a full meeting. I wonder if maybe we can introduce a draft, spend a couple quick minutes, and then spend time on the 18th.
Well, like we said, I think everyone has sort of expressed that we're not in any rush and we want to do this process with fidelity. So I don't see any rush to have it done by August 4th.
Well, the purpose could be.
Yeah.
We do wanna,
We want to get the ball rolling on.
so with the purpose, and then the purpose is voted by the board, which also gives them the room to begin a conversation with some community members to draft an RFP that will come back.
I mean, I do think voting on a purpose would probably be pretty fast.
Yeah, let's look at the purpose. If it becomes a larger discussion, though, let's plan to, table it up to 10-15 minutes and revisit on the 18th. But if everyone kind of has consensus on the purpose, we can.
We did have another question. I do, if you're still open to public comment.
I was just gonna make a recommendation for a local facilitator. And I don't know, you all know Peter Evans, who's principal in Montpelier. He doesn't live in Roxbury, he lives in Northfield, but he taught here years ago. He knows the community really well. And also Lucinda Sullivan, who's our town monitor. Either one of those two, if you could help me into it, would be perfect.
And usually when committees like this are formed, we would include community members on that committee.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I think it would be great for the Roxbury community members that are here tonight to start brainstorming with who you might want to see on that committee.
Joe, I'm sorry. Were you guys saying that Steve Dale put together, like, we actually have something in the box that we could open that box back up and pick up, or is that sort of obsolete by now? Okay.
We certainly had the X46 process, which could have been there if we wanted to. I mean, it was a series of meetings, you know, with relatively equal representation.
Right
I
before
think
COVID,
it
there-
began with the issue of what are the facts?
Yeah.
You know, just like Libby began with them, but they're not
Yeah.
clear yet, but not all of them. You need to, anybody on the committee needs to hear the facts, hear what's happening in Montpelier, hear what's happening in Roxbury, hear what you want to happen in there. And then you can go on. to discuss it.
Yeah, no, and we met many times in this room and had similar turnouts where we listened a lot, we took took information, put it together, and brought a package to the votes. So, but I think that, getting community members from both communities doing a lot of outreach to find those members, and the members who understand the communities and also have the time to put into it.
So would people be open to me trying on a motion for size about extending any decision-making on closing our buildings, or how are people doing?
I'm gonna ask first.
What's that?
I'm gonna ask.
We could do both. We could do that in the meantime. But, or we can wait.
Yeah, I would definitely entertain that. I mean, well,
Amanda's saying that maybe wait until we get the answer on pushing the deadline out. So like if we can push the actual deadline out for community vote and input to, another year or so legally, then that would be preferable over just pushing a commitment from us to our community to not take action. But I know you're looking at your agendas, your future agendas, and where it can fit.
So we can, I mean,
I think we can get the answer pretty quickly about what the process would be to extend or change that.
Yeah, we could do that as the step one, and then if that seems extremely bureaucratic and involved, then we could do a vote to give people more comfort.
Okay, so that will be our plan B.
Yeah.
And I would argue too, I don't see, I think that was put in there as part of Act 46 language
Yes.
for the worst possible case scenario of like a hostile takeover. And I
Yeah.
think it would be really irresponsible of any board. I don't see this board doing that, to not proceed with, keep picking on the middle school because it's easy to pick on. It's my neighborhood school. If we were going to do that, it impacts both communities. It would require a lot of community discussion and input, even if at the end of the day, the board formally votes. It's the responsibility of the board to reflect that community sentiment. I don't think it would just happen in a vacuum. That's like too bad, so sad. So, but I think that's what that was put in there. I remember when the legislature was drafting Act 46, there was that concern that, all right, 6 months from now, this new school board was just gonna clean
Change
house,
everything,
and
and
that did not come to fruition.
and I think there's a two merge as similar.
I've been on 3 committees to discuss what we do with Main Street. And you notice it's still there.
Okay, so the equity committee is going to
Mia has her hand raised.
Mia?
I think I was just about to do what you're about to do, Jim. So I'm going to let you do it and just listen.
Okay, so the equity committee, chaired by Mia, is going to
I'm not the chair.
Yes, you are.
is going to put together a purpose that we will look at August 4th. hopefully for approval, but if the determination is that it requires further discussion, we can table it to and that purpose will define next steps, which it sounds like will likely involve the hiring of a facilitator and the formation of some sort of broad-based multi-community.
And to the community, is our funding make those recommendations of like what you bring up in that survey that we sent out to the listen to the podcast.
I don't think we can do that until we know the purpose, right?
Oh, but for the, which is a
Just for your
separate, for the
school.
SR3 funding.
Yeah,
You wanna
it's a
explain?
it's a federal funding associated with COVID. So survey just went out about
Oh, that's, I
About-
thought you were talking
yeah.
survey. for-
yeah. So those immediate needs for this building right now. That's what we can talk about. So,
Right, there are other ways to get your hands on some solutions for some of the more immediate problems. So if there's a special ed, a lack of special ed licensed teachers or something like that, that information would be really important for us to hear in terms of allocating these ESSER funds, or maybe even other funds, if money could help solve the problem or any of the problems.
oh, Joe.
I'm sorry. Maybe this is out of order. I didn't know if maybe at a future meeting, I really hate to ask you, but we talked about busing last year. I wonder if we could give some sort of reassurance at a future meeting about what the busing schedule is. I know COVID is a little bit less of a concern. I know that the busing company is a victim of finding staff, just like all of us are. But is there any like immediate, like, do you feel like the busing is in better shape than it might have been last year?
I don't run the bus company, so I've yet to talk to a bus company manager. I got an email from her today, so we got,
So maybe before the last August.
is that a
meeting or
board meeting agenda item?
something. I feel like we talked about it last year.
Yeah,
Stacy-
we had her come in.
Stacy came because of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
challenges that she was having hiring staff last year.
And I suspect there will be staff challenges because all companies are having big problems with drivers right now. So,
Last year it was a budget question because it was going to be very expensive to have a bus during
No.
COVID, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we asked the board that first. If the
Yeah.
board wanted us to continue to spend money for the small amount of students, and the board said yes. So then the bus ran. She had some trouble finding buses.
Exactly, right, yeah. I think just
Which
that's
is
the
a different,
context
yeah,
by
which
which
is
it
a
came to
different,
us.
yeah.
Yeah. And
I do think you're right, the conversation should start.
yeah, yeah.
Because you have families.
So
that
it
are
just says
single.
people can plan. You know, well, I don't know what we're gonna know really. She's probably gonna say we're trying, we're looking for people,
yeah, we can definitely just
Maybe look at, can I just add one thing? Maybe look at all the options, like maybe you don't need that big old bus because we don't have COVID and there's probably what, 9 kids now? Between the 3 parents that are here that ride the bus, so maybe.
And
look at-
5 of them get on and stuff.
Yes, so maybe look at a short bus or a van or some sort of, look at all the options. So
I think
we
that
can
was
save
part
you-
of it, that there wasn't another smaller option.
yeah.
I think that came up.
I was told that it was COVID and it was a spatial issue. It wasn't that it wasn't available, so let's just look at all the options.
Great. Well, I really appreciate all the fantastic input on this. It's been too long since the board has come here, obviously due to COVID, but it's been super helpful. I appreciate your frankness and we want to hear more and more from the Roxbury community as let's move on to policy monitoring. We have 4 policy monitoring reports to approve. Let's start with FO5 education records.
Jim, can I quickly say one more thing to people before they leave? Just on our website where it lists our meeting schedule and our agendas, it also says meeting location. So if you're interested in attending the ones that are here, at Roxbury, that's already laid out for us with which dates we're going to be here.
Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure you don't want to hear about the policy.
I'm sure. About the same thing. They have camp in the morning.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Thank you so much.
No offense taken.
This is our with FO5 education records. Do you have a motion to approve FO5?
Just with that change I sent you,
It's a typo change?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I moved to approve. With the change.
Do you have a second? Any discussion? Yeah. All those in favor? FO7 alcohol and drugs, student alcohol and drugs. Motion to approve.
I move that we approve policy FO7, student alcohol and drugs.
Do you have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Policy F19, limited education, limited English proficiency students. Do I have a motion to approve F19?
A question on that
Sure.
one? So it said, I think there are 35 students. Is that number still accurate?
At the end of the 2020-21 school year.
And then there are 2.6
FTEs.
FTEs, and so their job entirely is to just work, make sure that not only the students, but the entire family gets language services, basically.
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
our 2.6 FTE works with students. I mean, they obviously work with families as well as part of that, but they're not giving language services to the family.
Okay, I just thought it said something. like that with students. But, that's something they help them do.
They do generally, because they're good people, but yeah.
But and it's also the law, if the family requests some translation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was a link in there, but at least for me, it didn't work. Nothing happened when I clicked that link, so. I was just-
So it's on our, it's a link to it's just directions for how to use the translation of like anything that goes home. It's on the MRPS website. So when I say website, it's on the quick links at the top.
I would like to discuss this. Google Translation is not a good measure to have families go to Google Translate to rely on that translation. As someone who works with BL families in other districts and who does quite a lot of translation, I don't think that Google is a reliable service to give families to, or to put families to do, hey, translate this, to go to Google. And so I think that I think there has to be different conversations around, like it is the law to translate some of these documents to families who do request the language access. And I think that, did you say in one of the reports that it was like 9 families that request translation?
Sure.
Okay, so I think for those at least, like our policies and our documents should be translated if we're going to support the family as well. So many districts have translate their documents. We have 2 organizations in the state who have translation services. The district already works with a translation company, which is a little pricey, more pricey than other ones, but there are different ways. The state, is also advocating for language access and language justice and stuff, and all of these things. So I think that as someone who grew up as English as a second language, whose mom didn't speak who got bullied, who my mom didn't understand why I was being expelled, and the policies because they were never written to her. And that's my experience. Now that I'm running this, I would like to, maybe we can meet with it, or like the Sylvia, you know, they do great job and they work. I saw how much they work in the blog and how much they translate to common language, your memos, especially around COVID, to simplify the language, but I don't think we should expect families to go on like Google, to tell them to Google and put it on the website. And so I think that any policy and any work that we do is not just for the families here, but for the future. And like when we're like doing this is like long-term longevity, like we have to translate 9 families, 9 languages. I think there's only like 4 families that actually request translation. So that's, in my view, that's like the bare minimum. Let's translate to those 3 languages. My experience is also that once the kids leave the elementary school, when the parents start losing that advocacy, high school, the kids translate for themselves or they already learn English, but the families are still not getting the language, the documents in the language. So I think that I would love to like really say any family that asks for translations for the meetings, we should be translating our policies and our instruction manual, the district manual, into those languages. And that we're not talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. The budget should not be.
And are we doing that? And are we translating separately? So it's the Google feature, which is
So the EL teachers work with each individual teacher and each individual family as to what their needs are. And so that's how that work happens. And they have an individual plan for every one of those 35 kids.
some cases.
So they do get a translation? That's what.
I think it translated, some documents from the district get translated. Are all the policies translated? No. Not all.
So what is, I don't understand the Google translation.
It's an online tool.
So
Oh,
that's
I
the
know
link.
that, but I mean, is that, I guess, so pretend like I don't know. I don't know what the current process is for translating. It
Oh,
sounds
no,
like,
that's not the, when a parent asks for translation, we don't send it to Google Translate.
okay, that's what I was
We're-
getting. I was
we
like,
have
wait a
people on
minute, I didn't
retainer
think we
for
did
that.
that.
But when you say any communication from the district or school can be translated through our website, directions can be found here. Is that what you're talking about? Is that what Amanda's referencing? It's sort of a Google Translate feature,
Not every communication is translated.
but I mean, that sentence is referring to, or could you direct me, I'm looking at the website right now. Can you direct me to where it is?
Yep, go to quick links.
Yep.
Translations and interpretation.
Yeah. Paste our website URL. Okay, so that's what it's referencing in that sentence. Click here for directions. It's just directing if they have any questions, you can paste the URL. The problem that I see with this is just that I try to go use, because my husband's Norwegian, so I've tried to go to Norway, like websites, and it's just like, there's nothing on there for me as an English speaker to even know how to navigate to this page. So I could imagine that people that speak a different language would even have trouble knowing what quick links means, what translate, what the next translation and interpretation, like that's all in a foreign language. So it might be nice to have something, I don't know if it's possible, but like a dream come true scenario might be like little buttons in the major languages that are spoken in our district to a page like this that's already translated into that language. I know that's like, would take a while and would be technical, but that would be really nice for someone who's not English
Not
speaking
really.
to see their language.
You can get this done online, maybe Snap.
But it's so the thing is like.
I don't mean
Google-
online
oh,
translations, I
okay.
mean a real person.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you can there are websites where you can go to find translators
Translation services
and
on
who
websites.
will do, the back webs page for you.
Yeah, so I would imagine there's only, like you're saying, maybe 4 or 5 predominant languages that are being requested.
So in 2019, there were, I think I sent that data. And this was because I know because I was working with the UES parents group, we would want to make sure the parents group is accessible to other families. And I've been talking about doing some of the translations of the documents that we just finished. So I asked, before I was a board member, I asked Sylvia if she could give us all the languages that were spoken at UES specifically, and who were the languages that we requested that could be translated. And she gave me a list of 5. These were 2019. 19 languages are, or like, I forget how many. 19 languages are spoken at UES, with 5 other ones that are requested. And so I know that Hannah, then there is a telehealth, not called telehealth, but telephone services they can access through, like, if families want. I was speaking with some of the families that it really doesn't really work for some of them. But so, like, what I'm saying is, like, to give accessibility is like, if we want at least the policies, the bare minimum should be like our manual should be in the hands of families. So that this is how I enroll my kid, and this is the language I am requesting, and so I know what the school is like, right? Like, we are also talking, like, Hannah and Sylvia don't speak those 5 languages, so it's not. So what I'm saying is, like, let's offer what we are offering all the kids. If they are requesting translation, it is the law to give them accessibility in some of these things. So let's just, it's 5 of whatever languages the EL department says it is. Again, I'm taking data 2019. So, for the incoming families, they should know the rules. I'll give you an example. There was a family when my daughter started kindergarten, who speaks Maya Lama, beautiful, very committed to her child. This is when we were doing the field trips. And there was a lot of issues trying to figure out, like, what were the requirements, whether to go in the bus. The teacher asked me to give her a ride because she really wanted to go, but they weren't allowed in the bus. There was a lot of lack of communication. Like, so I had to, like, I couldn't go take her because I wasn't going to the field trip, but I was trying to find somebody else. There's just like this third communication that in my Bible was like, this was a policy that was that year, the volunteering policy that was in place that should have been translated for her so she could understand that these were the rules, this is the fingerprint process, all of that, that it took a while. So that if at the beginning, Ms. Mela could have been like, here's the policy, she could have understood it. I think that there is.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but wouldn't we just update the policy to say what we want? And then
It's a very minimal policy.
yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't we just update the policy and say, this is what we want? That's it. Yeah, so let's just do that.
Right, because right now it just says has equitable access to school programs as required by law.
Right.
So, talking about translating the website or being more open to different languages on our website probably wouldn't even fall under this policy.
We could definitely do that.
Yeah, we could just make it more explicit.
Yeah. And there's not a procedure, is that right? But available on our website. For the F-19 policy.
Unless the policy dictates the need for procedure, there isn't one.
I think the policy says the superintendent or his or her designee shall be responsible for developing and implementing procedures to comply with federal and state laws. So does that mean?
Implementing. So we set the policy, at least.
But develop it, we don't develop procedures, right? We develop
Right.
procedures.
So those procedures aren't specific to this policy, right? So procedures on the school board page that are part of this monitoring process would be when the policy says the superintendent will create a policy or procedure to make this policy happen. Right, so we have a process through our EL educators to ensure that the law is followed and that they're doing, you know, like all of those things. That's part of their job responsibilities that I have to ensure that they do, right, through the evaluation and the supervision process. But there's not a, this policy is not asking for a very specific procedure and how the policy will be carried out. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's always like a little bit challenging for me to like, I can't interpret that sentence that way on my own. You know, so I appreciate your interpretation of it, but it's one of the like sort of ongoing roadblocks for me on being on the policy committee is I never really know when it requires a procedure or when it doesn't require a procedure.
So that's a good question. It's like, it is for developing and implementing procedures to comply with federal and state laws. So those procedures don't necessarily will be attached to this policy.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
it's just like, okay. I see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something to consider just being a little bit more, maybe being more specific in what we're looking for as a board in terms of broadening the definition of this policy. But that would be down the road. I think we can vote on the monitoring report as is.
Motion.
I need to approve the monitoring report on policy F19.
Second. Any discussion?
Well, I think because in my eyes, the policy as it stands, I agree with Libby's policy monitoring report in terms of compliance as it stands. But I agree with the issues that you raise and
It's a matter for revising policy.
yeah,
Business
that's
policy,
that's on us
Okay.
now.
Jim, do your own.
It's one to put on our list of like higher priority. We have a lot of work to do.
All those in favor? Any opposed? F21 firearms.
Yeah,
Motion to
I mean,
approve.
it's another one that will need to be revised,
Yeah.
but I move to approve the monitoring report.
Second,
I'll second that.
any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Great, motion to adjourn.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. It doesn't help me ever. I just carry it with me. Just one of these days.
Yeah.
Hey, Rutter.
We'll be behind my
It's the only way to reduce the policy.